Hi, I'm Jason, and in this video I thought I would talk about banishing the object. This is a question that crops up on the tape forums quite often. It's like, how I've got this response, I put it into a comment, and all I get is object. Let's get started, and we'll work through the best ways of dealing with it. Before we go any further, let's cover off consoles. So in tape, you can use console log, console info, console warn, and console error to display information within the automation run. This is incredibly useful, especially for things like handling the responses from APIs, because it means you can see what the response is within the automation run as you work. What's the difference between log, info, warn, and error? Very little, apart from the color. If we just run this here, we can come over and have a look. And we've got my name is Jason, and it's just the colors. So log is black, info is blue, warn is orangey, and error is red. Now, I tend to not use error unless it is for an error log, and then I use the others interchangeably, sometimes to break up the console so that I can see which part belongs to which easier, which you'll see later it can get a bit full. If we get rid of all of this for now, we want to see this response that we're getting. So again, if we do a log here of the response, and we manually run it, what we're going to get is an object. So this is the issue that people are getting. Now the reason is, because it's an object rather than a string, so it's not human readable. Now, the really simple answer to that is you've got to stringify it. So we can do that in a very simple way. We just put the response within a JSON stringify. If I then save and run it again, we now look at the script. This is the actual response that is now human readable. You might say, what happens if you stringify an already stringified? We will just quickly have a look at that. We can move this up to here, and then we will have another look at this. Now, I'll explain what's just happened there in a second, because it looks a little different. I will take this away. And the missing brackets. Right, now let's run it again. What we've now got is all these little lines. That will tell you that your original was a string. So you've basically restringed a string, and it all gets a bit confusing. So let's get rid of this. And we'll go back to that bit that was looking a little weird. We'll go so now we've added a null and a 2 into our stringify, and all this does is makes it a little bit easier to read a larger response. So you can see now that it's all basically indented and just prettified. That's all it's done is it's made it a little prettier in comparison to our original, which was a bit of a mass of words. It's a little harder to see what's going on. At a basic level, we've answered the question. We have now got rid of the object and we've put it into a format that can be readable by us. However, that doesn't really help us massively moving forward, because as we've seen, what we've ended up with is something that's really quite complicated and just a mass of words. Let's look at some techniques for actually handling your response and getting the data out of it that you want, because I can guarantee that 9 times out of 10 you don't want all the data in the response. If we remember, our response looked like this: data, quotes, and then what we've got is another object of ID, quote, and author. So let's say we want to get the quote from the first of the first quote. So we want this bit here. So what we can do there is we can just go data. No, we can't. We do response first. Then we go data. And then we go quotes. And then we want the first quote. So we go 0, because remember, numbering starts at 0, not 1. And then quote. So now, if let's see what we get now if we run it. And we get the quote. Now you might have noticed I didn't stringify it. And the reason I didn't stringify it was because we've extracted just one item from there, and therefore we don't need to stringify it. If we go back to this level and we run it again, then we do, because we've extracted the whole object rather than just the string within the object. At this point, it's also very worth noting that whilst the object is unreadable as object to you, it's the way that it needs to be for you to actually interact with the object. If we change this slightly and I go let's just change this, do that slightly. It doesn't actually like it because it sees it as something else. So we go here and we stringify our response into our variable of s, and then we try and do this action here, and we will add this back in so that it's nice, and so it's going to work from that point of view. Then this won't work because it's not passed. It's actually a string. We stringified it already. We can make this work by passing our string. I have to change this to p. And this has worked because we've repassed it. So it's now back to its object as opposed to the string. Right. We have taken out, we put all this back. What we've got is we've got our quote. So that's good. You could then add that to a variable. And then have an update block here. And add it. And that would add this quote to our text field of quotes. But what if we wanted, let's take it a step further. Let's say we wanted to extract all of the quotes and put each quote on a new line within our quote field. The easiest way of doing that is that we're going to use JSON. Now, JSON is one of the most powerful things within Tape. With it, you can do all sorts. But for this, what we'll do is we'll just do data. Now, let's go back and have a quick look at our, wherever it is, somewhere back here. Here we go. So we want data quotes. And then we can actually just do .quote. And I'm going to put a couple of square brackets afterwards. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to give us a new array of all of the quotes. The reason I've put the square brackets here is that if there was only one of these objects within quotes, it wouldn't give us an array if I didn't have those square brackets, which would then break things further down the line. But with those square brackets, it will always give an array, which means that the following parts will not break. We have evaluate. We want to evaluate our response. And now we're going to have to stringify this again. And we'll disable this for now. Now, let's have a look at what we get. So now we've got all of the quotes in one array. So that's good, but it's still not very useful. So what we can do now is we can join them with a couple of new lines. We no longer need to stringify them because the joining will take them out of the array. And then if we run that again, we can see the in the result, we've got each quote separated by a blank line. Now, if we re-enable our update record and run it a final time, then in the record view on the right, we can see the record being populated with the quotes. So now let's take it a stage further and let's look at targeted extraction. We can have a more complex response, as in this in the screen. This is a response of users, so it's a whole load of user data. If we come back to our setup, we have a user record and we have their name, but what we want to do is extract the email address and add it to the record. Let's take a look at where we can go with this. Now, first of all, let's have a little look at what it looks like. So we can do our usual console. And if we run that, first of all, let's disable that. If we run this, and we're going to run it on Michael this time, it has failed. Because we haven't defined D. So that's fine. What we now look at is we can look at the structure. So we've got data, users, and then we've got a chunk of information about the user. And in that, we have the email. So we want to find Michael Williams's email. So to do that, we're not going to need that again. So let's get rid of that. So we want to make D equal to Williams's email address. So we can do that using JSON again, or JSON, depending on which way you put it. So we've got data dot users. Now we want the email, but we don't want all the emails. We only want the email where it's Michael Williams's. So what we can do here is we can do, now this is case sensitive. You have to get it the same, equals, and then it's a word, so we put it in quotes, and we want the email, which is here, and then we can evaluate that, and we're going to evaluate our response. And we will console log that. Hopefully, if I've got everything in the right orders, if we go through here, we get the email address. So out of all that mass of data, we've extracted the email address for the person with the surname of Williams, which is pretty good in itself. But take that a step further, and we wanted to write it so that it extracted the email address for the person's record whose surname was X. If we split this out, because it makes it easier to look at, we use backticks this time. And the easiest thing to do is to cut this out, put this in here, and then we're going to take this, and we use the field name. So now, if we run this again, it's now going to find the surname. And I'll tell you what, to make it, we will and then we can see what's happening. So if we have a little look, then we can see our expression there, which is this with the surname dropped in. And again, we get the correct email address. And then it's just a simple matter of re-enabling this block. And now if we save and run it, the email address gets added to our record. And there you have fairly simple targeted data extraction.